The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show.
Mr. Smooth and Savvy
is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous
and not so famous,
the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jacob Hunt. Hi, Jacob. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you the last interview we did on the VE show, and I just wanted to have you back on the audio podcast because this is a little bit of a different format. We can kind of go on and on. I'm not so clock watching as I have to do in the VE show. And if it's possible to be more relaxed than I am on the VE show, the audio podcast does it, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely more relaxing for me. You seem, you get to sit in the recliner and sit back and ask people questions about, their personal pursuits. So it makes sense that it's relaxing for you. But for me, this is definitely more relaxed. I didn't have to do my hair.
There you go.
I didn't have to make sure I was wearing, good clothes. And I actually made sure I wore the same outfit because we had to reshoot our episode.
Right.
So I wore the same outfit just in case. So I had to make sure all of that was good. So this is relaxing for me, definitely.
All right. Well, let's ask the obvious question then. So what are you wearing?
What am I wearing? I am wearing Adidas sweatpants and a 21 Pilots hoodie.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah, it's cold there. I keep forgetting.
Well,
I'm in Vegas, so, it doesn't get all that cold here. So for me, it's shorts and a T-shirt.
yeah. So it's not that weather here. It's 56 degrees today.
Oh, that's warm for New York. Yeah.
It's like summer. It's like, let's go out. I had a friend tell me he wore shorts yesterday. And I was like, you're a little crazy. That's not me. But it is very, very warm. So I'm trying to make sure I get outside as much as I can in this weather before it gets, terrible again.
I don't want to get into the politics of this particular issue, but there's been a lot of media coverage of this trucker convoy in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm looking at the videos going, oh, my God, is it cold there? I mean, these guys... It looks like it's about minus 30 or something, and these people are all standing outside, and I'm like, oh, God.
I couldn't do it.
No, I couldn't either.
There are some causes that I could be compelled to stand outside in the cold for, but it's commitment. That's for sure. They're committed, and for better or worse, but
Well, definitely, and But it's just so funny to see it because, they're like right across the border, but the difference in temperature is stunning. I mean, I used to go to Toronto in 2003. I was like going every weekend from Boston because I'm originally from Boston. And it's only like a 45-minute flight, right?
Yeah.
But the difference in temperature, it made Boston feel like Miami Beach. And Boston is not warm in the winter by any stretch. It's generally a lot colder than New York City. But
Yeah.
God, Toronto was freezing. And it was just something about the wind off of Lake Ontario, the lake effect, and it was just brutal. I mean, I couldn't stay outside for much more than 10 or 15 minutes. You know it's cold when your eyelashes start freezing together.
Oh my
and you
goodness.
can't open your eyes. You know?
I can't deal with it. There are people who go for a run in the morning in the winter, which, first of all, I'm not a runner, so that's crazy in the first place. And then they get back from their run and their whole face is frozen. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how do you not look in the mirror and question that decision that you made? With your, there are guys with their beards frozen and the eyelashes and like ice on their face. I'm like, how do you stand by that decision? Look yourself in the mirror and say, yeah, that was a good choice to go out and run in the freezing cold. I lived in Chicago, which has the same
Chicago's
kind of cold,
brutal.
the lake effect.
Right.
And so, all the time downtown, seeing people go for a run in the morning, I was like, geez, I'm impressed by the commitment, but I'm also, I think you really have to question, hey, what am I doing here? What are these choices that I'm making?
I can understand people who are very committed to physical fitness, and that's fine. But you know what? If you live in some place that gets 20 and 30 below zero, buy a treadmill.
Get a treadmill. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And when it's above freezing, then go out,
Yes. Get a treadmill, go to a gym. Don't go run outside in the winter. Because a lot of the time there's snow, there's ice, like I don't know.
Well,
the whole thought process of going outside in the cold of winter to do physical activity is very foreign to me. And I'm all for fitness, all for all of that. But there are better ways to do it. It's 2022. We have great technology. Let's use the technology that we've come up with.
Yeah, we got central heating now. You believe that?
Yes.
We don't have to build a fire and huddle around.
We don't have to build a fire. We have air conditioners. We have motors and treadmills.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Let's advance into the 21st century.
Well, the one thing nice about those people, and I used to drive around in Boston and just laugh at them. So there is that, they give great fodder for humor, because when I'm driving in my car and it's all nice and warm in there and look and go,
Yep. You're having, you look at them and it's like, wow, you are having a terrible time right now.
Yeah.
And you did this to yourself. Like, I completely understand. But again, I do admire the commitment that takes. If somebody were to say, for whatever reason, I have to run outside and I'm going to stay committed and I'm going to go in the winter, like, I do respect the commitment.
Well, all right, let's
beat a very foreign concept.
Let's beat this horse a little bit more, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
What possible benefit is there to run in 20 below zero weather, as opposed to getting on the treadmill inside your nice and warm gym? What is the possible difference?
I have no answer. I agree with you. I don't see the benefit at any way. I think the only thing I can think of is a person not having access to a treadmill or a gym or something like that where
okay, but
I think that's the only thing I can cook up in my head to say, okay, that's why this person's doing that. But even that is a little bit of a stretch, I think.
Well, generally those people, I mean, you don't see like a homeless guy pushing a shopping cart jogging in 20 below.
You're right.
These people are middle class to upper middle class professional white collar people that certainly could afford a treadmill, or their luxury condo certainly has a gym somewhere in that building.
So right.
You're
so right. It is not the struggling person who is, trying to make rent. It's the white Midwesterner who is doing this. You are so right.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, that is such a good point.
There is one thing that is coming to my head, and I'll throw this out, and then we'll move on to something else. I watched a National Geographic special years ago, and it was these two guys who decided that they were going to cross-country ski across the breadth of Antarctica, okay?
Oh, goodness.
Now, obviously, that's as crazy as these people out there jogging, but this took them 2 months or something, right?
Yeah.
And what I found interesting was that because obviously it's cold, they had to eat something like 12,000 calories a day to maintain that level of energy, right? And you have to think that, well, okay, I'm not going to, they have to carry everything that they've got. So they had to find like the most, so they loaded up with chocolate and granola and just all these amazing stuff that they could carry that was light, that had tons of carbs and tons of calories, right, to keep them going. At the end of the 2 months, even though they were eating 12,000 calories a day, because of the cold, they lost 25 pounds each.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. My brother and I went on a really intense hike of the Grand Canyon. We hiked all the way down to the Colorado River and then back up in one day. And we decided, like, we're going to do this really, intense hike. It's going to be crazy. So we had to load up on all of the food too, and, drink so much water. And we were following all of these rangers are like, hey, this could be deadly. Here's what you need to do in order for it to not be. So we followed all of those things, and yeah, it was, at the end of it, we were hungry. We had eaten so much as we went, and we had so much to drink, but there was you never had to use the restroom, and you were hungry the whole time because it was like you're constantly burning everything you're taking in.
Did you go in the summer?
No, we went in February. We went
the
end of February into the beginning of March. Was like our whole Grand Canyon trip, and I think the actual hike itself was like February 27th when we did this, because it gets, even in February, the inside of the Grand Canyon got up to 90 degrees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now,
if not higher.
Summer would be a death march if you wanted to go in there. That's just brutally hot.
Somebody did the same hike as us, I think in May, and unfortunately they passed away, and their shoes had melted. Like it was so it was wild to months later see that somebody died doing the same thing we did. But I think the time of year is so important to pick out, and you plan out in advance, like this is when we want to go, this is when we want to do this, because it's an intense hike, and it's one I'm getting the itch to do something like that again, to do a big hike or a mountain climb or something like that.
Well, now that we've covered the weather from one extreme to the other, let's move on to poetry. I think was one of the topics that we were going to try to dissect a little bit. Now, you were on the VE show, and we were promoting your book called Shift, and it's a collection of poetry that you've written, and there were some illustrations by whom? By
Jericho DeLea is his name.
Okay.
And he's an incredible artist. I said it on the show as well, but really brought the book to life.
Now, is this a friend of yours, or is this somebody you work with online? Because I've seen a lot of those where authors have just gone online and looked for an illustrator, and they find somebody. And I've had people who are Americans who said, oh, yeah, this artist I found was in the Czech Republic or India, or, they just connected with people from all over the world.
Yeah, so I actually found Jericho through different album artwork that he had done and other artwork. So Jericho, and I don't know him personally. We've interacted quite a bit now, of course, so I do feel connected with him, but he's in Spain, and he did album artwork and just some illustrations for a rapper named Andy Mineo, and I saw the artwork and I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I figured out who the illustrator was, and it was Jericho. And I followed him, and for a few years I had been, following him, interacting with him on social media. And then as I wrote Shift, I decided, I kind of stepped back from it and I said, okay, what would make this book of poetry different? How can I elevate this to be different? How can I put a different spin on this book? And I decided, hey, let's do illustrations. And Jericho was the first person I reached out to. I didn't look at any other artists doing the art. I've reached out to other artists about other projects, but for this world that I was building, I immediately thought of Jericho, reached out. He was so excited to be a part of it, and I was amazed because he has a bigger platform than me, so I was like, wow, this is an honor to work with you. It was really just an incredible experience because I gave him the book and I said, hey, whatever direction you want to go with this, please do. I gave him a list of a few things that were important to me about the book and about the vibe of the book and how it's built, and Jericho read it and he sent me, these are the pages that I want to illustrate and this is what I want to do. And I just allowed him to really take his own approach. And I played a little bit of creative director as we went, but really it was all Jericho.
And you said he was in Spain, so that was my point, is that people
yes.
are connecting all over the world to do this. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's the great side of the internet.
I completely agree.
It is a double-edged sword, and there certainly are bad sides to it. It's one of the reasons why we shut the comments off on YouTube.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have asked us, why do you do that? My rationale is that if you go on Twitter, particularly Twitter, people will just tweet the nastiest shit that they can possibly think of to say about people, right? Where they would never have the nerve to do that in person. You would never say something like that to someone's face, but they will do it on Twitter. It's similar on YouTube. If you notice some of the real big shows, particularly the political ones, they get just the most ridiculous comments. Okay. So number one, I don't have time to go through and moderate all of the comments that might come through. The second is more of a psychological thing, where I think if you have to make it a little more challenging for somebody to comment, they'll think twice. Most people would just say, I'll forget it, right? And they won't comment at all, which is fine. But if somebody really is intent on leaving a comment, if you make them jump through a couple of hoops first, then you tend not to get just this foul stuff that people want to put. Also, when we first started out, we were getting spammed incredibly in the comments with all of these porn sites. And I don't understand where that came from at all.
That's amazing.
That's
so funny.
So I just said, you know what? Let's just shut them off. And then in the show notes, we'll put a link. If you would like to comment about this episode, please click this link. Then it takes you to another site. Then it allows you to write a comment, but you have to leave an email address. Okay?
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. I definitely noticed that the comments were off when I researched your show, and I completely understand the logic, because if this were the YouTube show that we were doing, there's a very good chance that already we would have any kind of runner in the Midwest. I specifically called out, and you did too with me, but we specifically called out white Midwestern luxury condo living runners. And there's a chance, if the comments are on, they're all spitting vitriol at us for, not understanding why they do what they do. And so I support it. In particular to, in the episode that we did, I didn't call anybody out for anything, But now that we've already kind of alienated runners, I'm all for, let's not have comments.
I agree. God, yeah, those comments would be from the cancel culture woke mob, I think. If we started getting
I don't know
people.
that it's the woke mob we have to worry about in terms of our comments about running, but yeah, I think it would definitely be a mob, and they would all be runners, so that mob would be able to move a little bit quickly, so I'd be a little bit worried about running away.
It's so sad how tribal America has become now, and everybody is barricading themselves behind their little groups and ideologies. This is not conducive to unity in any stretch of the imagination. And unfortunately, it's not getting any better. And
No.
Given your age, I'm very happy that you're growing up in this generation where there isn't a draft, because God forbid something breaks big time in the Ukraine, and they could be chopping off your man bun and sending you halfway around the world.
I don't have a man bun.
I'm joking about the man bun.
I have very long. It's not very long, but I do have long hair. It's not a man bun.
I'm kidding about the man bun.
I am not another man bun poet.
Okay.
And so I want to establish that. But I do agree with how isolated we've become in our beliefs. Now, I think that there's I think part of the problem is that the line is being drawn in the sand in places because there are some beliefs that we can't have a conversation about. It's just wrong. There are certain things that are just wrong.
Yeah, which is
about
ridiculous.
The way that people are thinking and talking and behaving. And I mean, for example, the insurrection at the Capitol, we can't have a conversation about, the validity of that, just like we can't have a conversation about the validity of slavery. Like, it's all just wrong. So there's a place where there's that line in the sand because there can't be a discussion around it.
Right.
But I do wish that we could have more open conversation, because I think the really harmful beliefs that are taking place specifically, in America, because that's where we are, but we're seeing it all over the world as well. You mentioned Canada. I think that a part of it is because we're so isolated, because we're not having conversations, so we can't fact check and share truth because nobody's open-minded either. So we can't have that kind of like not even a debate, but just a healthy conversation to shed light on different situations, because there are things that I've never experienced and I don't understand. And there's things that, another person has never experienced. And if you don't experience something, then it's very hard to understand it if it's not being explained to you. So it's just a mess.
Well, I agree with you. And, I think it's ridiculous that any topic should be off limits. Everything should be able to be talked about. It's the only way we're going to find answers, and we're going to find compromise, and we're going to find some agreeable ground on things. I mean, that's how politics is supposed to work.
Yeah, we're supposed to kind of come together and find, like you said, that common ground.
Right.
I think and I don't, by earlier when I said, we can't talk about slavery, I don't mean we can't talk about slavery, but it's the validity and some of, there are conversations where it's not off limits and off topic, but it definitely needs to be understood what is right and what is wrong. There are more black and white conversations where it definitely needs to be, hey, my position is that slavery is wrong, purely. Let's just start there. And, there are a lot of things that, there are more gray area topics.
Yeah.
But there's nothing off limits, but we definitely need to grow out of some of these very narrow-minded views, and the only way to do that is for us to have conversations and to be open to
new
explaining
ideas
things in a little bit more detail.
I agree. And the media has definitely added fuel to all of this. They're loving it, you know. But again, here we were talking about the internet and how wonderful it is that you can connect with people all over the world. The downside of the internet is that it's taken away the lion's share of viewers and thus sponsors' dollars from the major media outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I grew up, there was ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. That was it. If you wanted to watch TV, you got your choice of those four. Okay. They were big. They were powerful. I'll give you a number. One of my favorite talk shows, and who I kind of admire as somebody that, you know, I wanted to emulate, was Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. Okay. He averaged 60 to 80 million viewers a night. Okay.
Wow.
Now, the biggest name in this business right now is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan gets an average of 11 million per episode, which is astounding.
That's wild.
And if you take any show that's on NBC, ABC, CNN, they're getting somewhere between like 1 million to maybe 1.5. Well, actually, CNN's even lower than that because they're kind of going down. I think the number one rated show on CNN got 500,000 views. There is no more status like Johnny Carson, okay, where you get 60 million people. Here's even a better one. You go back to the infancy of the television age. Go back to the early 50s of I Love Lucy, which was the most popular show at that time. Her pregnancy episode got somewhere around 60 to 70 million views at a time when the population of the United States was 150 million people.
Yeah.
So that means
did you happen to see the movie that just came out, Meet the Ricardos?
Being the Ricardos, yeah. I interviewed Dana Lynn Barron, who was in the movie. It's on my site. Check it out. You might like that interview.
I definitely will.
But the point is that half of the American population, of the total population, watched that show. And the other half probably didn't have a television at that point. Because in 1952, TV was a brand new thing and they were expensive. You know, not everybody could afford one. So my point that I'm laboring to get to here is that the media has fueled the fire of all of this division and just turned the heat up to high because this is what they think. And I suppose they're correct in this perverted way of thinking that it does sell. Okay. People want to see conflict. People want to see violence. And the number one thing that seems to bring in viewers is civil unrest. Okay, because it's the fear factor turned up to 11 on the dial. If you showed a story of, you know, somebody adopting a puppy, well, you can all go, oh, but that doesn't get nearly the viewership as riots and looting and killing and mayhem in the streets.
Yeah, that's true. That I think I really like that you mentioned the fear. I think the fear factor of these programs is, you know, it's what keeps them alive. It's what keeps them going. And they are just trying to make people afraid. And I think that's also, I mean, I know that's definitely lending to this division and unrest that we're experiencing because everybody's afraid of everybody on the other side.
What I find ironic, because I'm old enough to sort of remember this, is that it has completely flipped around, though, politically. If you go back to the late 60s, that was certainly a tumultuous time in the United States. We were very, very divided. And yet the media was completely on the other side of the political spectrum. There was a show called the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour that they kept trying to take off the air because Tommy and Dick Smothers, the two brothers in the show, were constantly criticizing the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. And the media was trying to censor that because they felt it was un-American to speak out against the government. Okay?
Yeah.
The media was very conservative in those days. And it was the liberals who were all speaking out against the government because they didn't want to be a part of the Vietnam War. They thought it was wrong. We didn't belong there, which I agree with. We didn't belong there. We had no business killing 55,000 U.S. service members and God knows how many Vietnamese. All right. Now, when I saw this Canadian trucking convoy, the same media is saying that this is so disrespectful that they were betraying the trust of the government institutions by this was on the other side of the caravan. Now, these are the liberal media, and yet they're the ones saying now, oh, well, you must respect the government, where it's the conservatives who have changed, saying, we don't trust the government now.
Yeah, well,
it's totally flipped
off of who is in office, who the head honcho. If the head honcho agrees with you, then you're going to say, oh, let's trust this person. Well, if you agree with them even.
Yes and no, because when Trump was in office, his whole campaign was on distrust of the government. Okay?
Yeah.
He wasn't coming in as a, the swamp creature. He was coming in as somebody who was going to blow it up because government had failed the American people. At least that's what he was saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
but then when he got there, he changed the narrative to say, hey, you should be trusting me. You shouldn't be trusting these other...
Well, right. But
other government entities.
It just became all about him. I mean, that was the downside of Trump, was that the whole thing became just all about him, and he just badmouthed Congress up, down, and left, and it just, well, let's not get into that. But my point is that it's flipped, okay? That the people that are trying to preserve the government institutions are on the complete opposite side of the political spectrum than they were in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's it.
So the whole definition of liberal and conservative has changed.
Yeah. I think, well, even just the definitions of parties have changed, and the identities of parties have changed, and the issues that they care about have changed. So it's all, I mean, I look at it like a pendulum swing.
It does.
It's going to go up towards one side,
and
it'll hang there for a while. And then when that doesn't work for either side, when their positions don't get them elected, they'll flip to the other side and hang there for a while. And when that doesn't work, they'll flip again.
The problem now that I see with the pendulum analogy is that before it used to sort of tick tock like a grandfather clock, sort of in the middle. Okay, it'd go a little bit this side, maybe then a little bit that side. Now it's swinging 180 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very true.
Yeah, and we're going from the extreme one side to the extreme the other side. And that's dangerous. To me, that's dangerous. If it's a little bit in the middle and just kind of swinging subtly, it's not as bad. Yeah. So I've never seen it
talking about this. Personal beliefs. Yeah, I think we should always be looking to continue learning and growing and continue to be curious as humans, and having these new experiences. And so our beliefs, shouldn't necessarily be swinging unless you find that, oh, wow, you have an epiphany and I was totally wrong about this. There I see that, but I just see it as these continual steps forward, and the extremes are just, I don't think it's healthy.
No, I don't either. Have you had any sort of life epiphany like that where you had a very strong opinion on a particular topic, and then it completely shifted 180 degrees after you experienced something?
I don't know. I wouldn't say I've completely shifted beliefs really in pendulum swing 180 degrees. I think for me it's been developing and learning. One of my favorite quotes ever of all time is Walt Whitman's quote, "Be curious, not judgmental." So
Quote.
I've had a lot of epiphanies over time, but I wouldn't say that I have had a complete 180 turnaround from, oh wow, I was completely wrong. I think that I know there's a lot that I've been wrong about over the years, and there's a lot that I've had to learn and grow. And I think moving, the first extreme move I had was moving from small town Ohio to Chicago, and experiencing Chicago and all of the wonderful things about Chicago, and some of seeing the negative things, and learning and being committed to learning about people and how the world works. And then I moved back to Ohio and had some epiphanies there of, wow, this is, I'm back in Ohio and it's the same. It felt like I never left.
Yeah.
And then I moved to New York, and it's been a similar experience over now it's been about 6 months that I've been here, and continuing to learn, continuing to grow. I think the biggest thing is that I've always pursued new experiences and meeting new people, and people with a different background than me. And so that has kind of created this place where I haven't had a 180 turn, but I've had kind of continuous epiphanies.
Well, I know this is going to sound like one of those very left-handed sort of compliments, but it's meant as a compliment nevertheless.
Okay.
After that comment, I think you are like the most rational and lucid poet that I've ever met.
I appreciate that. I think you might, when I'm having a bad mental health day, you might not agree with that statement you just made. I do try, and like we mentioned before, I work very hard to exude positivity and love, and I struggle to do that inwardly as well. But I was also raised by an incredible woman who taught me how to talk to others and how to listen. That's the big one, how to listen. She knows I like to talk. I've always known how to talk. She taught me how to listen and how to write as well. So a lot of the feelings and a lot of the messiness happens on the pages, and that's how I express myself. And really, this book, since we're just having open, honest conversation, like I'll tell you here, this book started as a breakup book after a really horrible ending to an engagement.
You were engaged?
I was engaged, and I was too young. First of all, I'm 24, and I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm really glad that I'm not married right now. But I also, it was very messy. I was very hurt. I experienced a lot of abuse in that relationship and didn't process it or realize it until even years after. So it was very messy, and this book was my lifeline. And I shared it with my mom. My mom is also a writer, and she's one of my first readers with anything that I write. And she was like, this is a mess, but it could, if you clean it up, this could really help someone else. So then this book became kind of a pursuit of turning this from a life raft that was mine and crafting it into something that could be useful for someone else.
Well, let me ask you something, because you said you're 24 years old. How old were you when you got into this relationship?
I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school when I got into the relationship.
Okay.
And I was 20 when I had just turned 21 when it ended.
So this was like high school sweethearts type thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it was high school sweethearts who the relationship at the beginning, and I mean a lot of high school sweethearts experience this. I would say it's more of a widely experienced thing among women where the man changes, the male partner has, becomes a drunk, or something, becomes a total different person. And in this case, for me, I mean, it was a beautiful beginning to the relationship. There were definite bumps in that beginning time, but kind of overlooked those. And I overlooked things for a really long time. And then it all kind of accumulated in a person that I didn't know anymore and didn't recognize, and kind of all came crashing down. So it was a very messy situation. It was a very harmful situation to be in. It was a toxic environment for me. And so getting out of that and finding the ability to breathe and move forward, without the poetry, it wouldn't have happened. And so the whole goal is now maybe to allow this book and the poetry to reach somebody who's in a toxic situation but doesn't know how to keep going.
So you were slated to get married at what age? Like 18, 19?
We were engaged at 19. Yes, we were engaged at 19.
Now, you see, that was perfectly normal when my grandparents were were growing up.
Yeah.
But if I was a father of a boy or a girl who said, we're going to get married, and, he's like 18 or 19, I'd be like, nope.
Yeah, well,
because
and that was kind of the reception.
Times have changed.
Times have changed. And there was definitely some mixed feelings, but it was going to be a long engagement as well. So, we would have been engaged for 2 years by the time we got married, I want to say.
I was going to say 20 years. Well,
20. See, now, I mean, now I'm like, okay, I'm not ready to be married now, let alone in 5 years. I don't know that I want to be married. So I'm in a very different headspace. And that's part of the journey. That's part of learning. Now, I completely, I think it's very possible that high school sweethearts who go through college together and get married kind of at a younger age or right around where I am, I could see. I'm also a hopeless romantic. So that's what's speaking through this. But I could see somebody else who's had a different experience than me and who has been in a very positive relationship. I could see it working and being this beautiful thing, because in that case, you get to be with a person for 60 to 80 years. So I think that could be a really beautiful thing.
I'm going to speak just from personal experience that I got married. I was 43 years old for the first time. And it took me that long to become emotionally mature enough to handle being married. Okay.
Yeah.
You remember how we were talking about a little while ago about the pendulum swinging as it related to politics?
Definitely.
Well, my pendulum always sort of swung in the middle for my own personal life, my emotional pendulum. Okay, not about politics. When I got married, that pendulum started to do the 180 bit. Okay? And through that traumatic pendulum swing, I came to the realization and the resolve and had the epiphany, so this is what marriage is about. That's what did it. And now we've been married for 15 years.
Congratulations.
My wife is my best friend, my soulmate. I just can't imagine living without her there now, because yet we're very much apart in what our daily routines are. She's got her own business. She's got her own thing going. I got mine. We have our time together. We're like two circles that overlap slightly. Okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. So they get the middle bit, and that's ours. But the outside bits are our own individual. And when you said that about high school sweethearts and they go to college together and they do this, I think that's too much time together. There is value to being separate.
Yeah, and in my head, I didn't say it in that moment, but in my head, that individual being an individual, I think it's possible. I think everybody goes through a different experience, so there's a very strong piece to me that says, hey, this is possible for it to happen if the individual can stay an individual, and that's an uphill battle. That's a struggle, and I don't know that everybody could do it, but I think there's probably one couple out there who could do it. And
there's probably one. Yeah.
Be the success story and kind of set the example. My parents were married very young and then got divorced, and that was when I was 13, and my mom saw how much I was struggling with that. And that was when she told me, hey, you should write poetry, because it's what helped me through some things in my life, and it's helped me process things. So the traumatic divorce and the lack of support from my father really resulted in the poetry starting. And then, so I found a safe place in the poetry at that point. So when I was in this toxic relationship, it was really the only thing keeping me afloat for a long time. So, yeah, I think emotional maturity is a very interesting thing, especially when it comes to men. We are not emotionally mature people most of the time. So
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
It's, it might be 43 until a lot of men should get married. I think women are a step ahead of us in sometimes, so maybe they only need until they're 30. But it's just such an interesting thing, and to have gone through it and had it crash and burn. I'm just from looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore.
We've got just about 5 minutes, and I wanted to hit on music real quick, but I got to preface this. Are you a Beatles fan at all?
I am.
Okay. Have you seen the movie Get Back?
Yes.
Okay. You were talking about these relationships where the people are together all the time. When I watched Get Back, now I knew the whole story of the Beatles already, but this was like, film proof, right?
Yeah.
You watch the 6 hours of that, and you notice that for the most part, you can't get a piece of saran wrap between John and Yoko.
That's true.
Okay. Now, I know that pissed off a lot of people because obviously they're trying to work, and, she's like this appendage that's on him, right? But yet, from John's perspective, they were together 24/7, all day at work. I'm sure after they finished their recording session, he didn't say, all right, Yoko, you go home. I'm going to go somewhere. No, they went home together. Yeah. They had dinner together. They did whatever together. And it was 24 hours. Now, I couldn't do that. Okay. I could not be with, as much as I love my wife, I could never be 24 hours glued together like that. And she couldn't be with me either. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're good that way. It's like, okay, go. And when I go to the studio to work, I take the dogs. We've got 2 dogs. So it gives her a break so she can do her stuff. And then I bring the dogs home. So the dogs have a couple of different homes that they go to. And they know we have beds and everything set up in the hallway for them in the studio. And so it's all good. But my point is, this was a relationship that was that one that you were talking about.
Yeah.
That relationship between John Lennon and Yoko Ono, I think, was that one. And once he found that, nothing else mattered. You could tell in that film that the breakup was happening. and that Paul was the one trying to keep it all together and being bossy to everyone, and nobody appreciated it. George wanted out because they weren't doing enough of his music, and John just didn't care anymore because he had Yoko, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. John, none of them did a good job of showing appreciation for what the others were doing. And when you saw the beginning of the end was the death of Brian Epstein.
True.
Because he did a good job keeping them together, and it wasn't bossing them around, but he made sure they had a schedule. Yeah. He made sure that they were pursuing the right things and spending time wisely. And all of a sudden, Paul McCartney was thrust into that role of trying to keep them together. And I think
others resented it. And the others resented it. Yeah.
And my perception of Paul McCartney dramatically changed through the Get Back documentary, because I saw, wow, he's the only one pushing this boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
The other ones are not giving him anything. And that first episode, to be honest, I've always been, if you asked me John or Paul, I would have always said John. But that first episode really shook my confidence in John Lennon. And I think it's very similar to the friendship between Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, where two fabulous writers, but Hemingway was like, F. Scott Fitzgerald, if he stopped drinking, he'd be the best writer alive. But his recent book is terrible because he was drunk the whole time. And he's producing terrible work. And it's a different situation, but I think that Paul was really looking at the group and saying, who else is doing anything here?
I have never heard that comparison of Lennon and McCartney with F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway. That is a great analogy. Because
it's different.
But it's the same.
Similar.
Yeah, but it's similar. They weren't contractually obligated to each other.
Yes. They weren't in a band.
They weren't in a band. They weren't, a songwriting team. Mm-hmm. But the friendship and the dynamic of the friendship, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it all changed after once a line was drawn in the sand, just like John and Paul. Once Ernest said, I'm not going to be around you. The funny thing is that Ernest Hemingway, and the hypocrisy of Ernest Hemingway is that he was just as drunk as F. Scott Fitzgerald.
He handled it better, though.
He was a genuine... He held his liquor better.
He held his liquor better, yeah.
He also was a far, more problematic individual than F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
But, so it was the kettle calling the pot black.
Exactly.
But he definitely saw something in F. Scott Fitzgerald. And Fitzgerald is one of my favorite writers as well. So he saw the potential there and was so disappointed in the execution of that. And I think that that's very similar to Paul with John. I think when you look back at what John could have done, even recognizing how much he did do, which is similar to Fitzgerald, where Fitzgerald wrote one of the greatest American novels ever with The Great Gatsby, John Lennon is one of the greatest, if not the greatest songwriters ever. And
in
so
the pop
for
world,
Paul,
I would agree.
For Paul to recognize the potential and see that it wasn't happening is really quite crazy to say. That could John have done better or done more is really out of this world to imagine. But when you're at the level of John Lennon and Paul McCartney and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, potential is just completely different. It's pure genius.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing the genius in the other person and saying, wow, I think that you could do even better.
We got to wrap this up. Do you want to come back and do part 2 sometime? Yeah.
I would love to. I've loved our conversation so far. I love being able to just have genuine, honest conversations. I would love to get more time to talk through music with you, because I know we both love music. So yeah, I would love to come back.
Great. Stay tuned for part 2. We're going to leave it as a cliffhanger. And we're going to talk more about the Beatles, and we're going to talk more about poetry on part 2 with Jacob Hunt. Jacob, thanks so much for coming, and I look forward to our next installment.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank